Right.
Well, now I'm thinking, instead of focusing on just the individual, what it's like within one person when there's that discrepancy of am I safe because I have faith, or am I safe because I have my comfortable things around me? Like I have my comfort blanket and I've got it smells the right way and my things are near me and that gives me a sense of peace. And we were talking about that a lot last time, but now I'm thinking, how can we tie that into what I think is happening at the top of the hierarchy, let's say, with the NGOs like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization? How are they also putting top down pressure on us to behave that way? So that would be my contention, is I do think that they are putting pressure on us, but I also think it's happening for a reason. And I think that unless we're privy to the reason, which it's not secret information, it's on the website, but unless you actually choose to seek out that information and contemplate it for yourself, then you might be doing exactly what they want you to do rather than doing what you would prefer to do on your own if you were given a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So on the World Economic Forum website, which is WEF, they're an NGO, which means they're a non-governmental organization. But it also means that they influence countries because they're the World Economic Forum. So it has this illusion of like, we have all of these big corporate entities that support us and all of these highfalutin donations from politicians. And so this is really just a great globalist endeavor to help everybody. And they have this idea of the Great Reset, which is saying in light of COVID-19, in the darkness of COVID-19 rather, this is a great opportunity for us to really batten the hatches, come together as citizens of the earth, and move forward into what Klaus Schwab calls the fourth industrial revolution, which will be the integration of man and machine. You'll know if you're healthy because you'll have the chip in you, but it's sending a Bluetooth signal to your phone and it tells you that you're healthy, or if you got exposed to COVID again, or if you're due for an appointment, what your social credit score is. It's all going to be integrated. And they have all these fun terms about the Internet of Things and like cyber. It's hard to remember all of the neologisms because what they're trying to do is say, look, we're building all of these new things, but I think it's just retreading the wheel, and now we have new words to describe.
Which is really an Orwellian kind of concept. It's, limit words in the dictionary we all use and create new terms by which the narrative gets established and you don't know how to talk about reality outside of the established narrative.
Yeah, it is very Orwellian because the phone becomes that, like in the 1984, they would just burn the books and reprint new books. But now we have the phone that does it automatically. It refreshes.
Right.
Which that's the act of refreshing. He's just trying to conceptualize, well, even in the future, they've got books. No, we don't have books anymore.
Yeah.
We just have the phone. And when I go to the website, oh, now it says this.
Right.
I have no memory of what it said before. I didn't write it down and it's not printed. Yeah. So now it says this and I believe that.
Yeah, unless there's a screenshot of that controversial tweet or that deplatformed, censored idea, unless someone gets a screenshot and starts pushing it through Reddit or whatever, it's gone.
Yes.
And so for a moment, if you're on at the right moment, you can get a fact or a truth. But if it's censored, it disappears and the new definition and narrative take over.
Totally. And even then, like it makes its way onto YouTube, but it will be censored. And so it'll have a link at the bottom, like someone's talking about COVID. So it'll have a link about, well, actually, here's what COVID-19 was. And it's a Wikipedia link, which, and then, or it'll be like you're talking about the Great Reset. So if we were on YouTube and this came up and a censor found it, they would have a link to the Great Reset on Wikipedia. It's like, here's what it really is. It's definitely not what you and I are talking about because we're not the Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
So this is where the breakdown becomes very individualistic. We're talking and we're both speaking in good faith, and you're willing to believe that I'm not just saying things I don't understand, that I'm only speaking because I really have looked at what I'm talking about, and now I'm willing to say it from memory. But on the internet, were we on YouTube, then there would be a link that challenges me directly that says, well, he's talking about this and blah, blah, blah. But here's really what the Great Reset is. So when I want to draw a conclusion about what I think is happening, it's only relevant if it matches up with what the internet says I'm allowed to think.
Yeah.
That's Orwellian. That's super dangerous. But even in their own words, they literally say, Klaus Schwab says this, we want you to own nothing and you'll be happy.
Right.
We want you to integrate yourself with machinery. But it's
happy.
great. Yeah, exactly, because it's great. It's like you'll be healthier.
Guaranteed minimum. They package it with enough ideas that in a generation that has largely lost its capacity for critical thought.
Yeah.
You can't go to a store and if the machine is broken down, take any less than 5 minutes for them to figure out how to give you change, if they even accept cash.
Yeah.
So you can't do the math, you can't process the logic on the fly. And so in the absence of critical thinking, and it cannot be underestimated, the absence of a common narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Judeo-Christian civilization used to have a common narrative.
Mm-hmm.
If we went outside and it was raining like crazy, you didn't have to be a Christian to understand the guy that says, wow, it's like Noah's flood here. Everyone knows that's a big, heavy rain.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes part of the vernacular of ideas.
Yeah.
This is Noah's flood. And so believer, unbeliever, we're talking the same language.
Mm-hmm. All
All of that language is gone. Critical thinking diminished.
Mm-hmm.
The clock cycles has replaced brain cycles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so how do you even, when you come along and say, hey, you can upgrade your body, you can get genetic enhancements, and you can get a guaranteed minimum wage, what 13 to 19-year-old isn't going to think, that sounds pretty good. I don't really enjoy working anyway.
Yeah, and it's trendy. I think that's the idea, is you're just supposed to stay abreast of what's going on. The point is what is forward, not what is core.
Yeah, progressive has gained a default favorable idea. The very idea of being progressive is so linked to progress. That's part of why I think the brilliance of liberals are generally better at strategizing 5 steps ahead, in my mind, than conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so to shift from liberal, which had come to have kind of a negative connotation for many, to progressive is automatically forward-thinking, beneficial. We're progressing.
Yeah, not stuck in the mud, not looking backwards.
Right.
It's like we live in the real world.
Right.
We really see what's going on.
Right.
So
So that's part of the pressure you're describing, to
Yeah.
stay in the path of progress.
Yeah.
It's trendy.
Yeah, to be at the forefront and to
Right.
be like, because the threat is, look, we're all gonna die. Like the world is gonna burn alive because of climate change, and also you're gonna get COVID and die if that doesn't happen first, because you have 5 comorbidities. But you shouldn't change that by exercising or dieting or drinking
Right.
more water or
Yeah.
sleeping better. You should just get as many shots as we have to roll out to prevent you from that ultimate consequence. But that logic really worked for a lot of people. It wasn't there wasn't somebody on TV. I mean, just to make the point very clearly, there wasn't somebody on TV that was saying, look, there's a flu going around and it looks like this is going to be the most contagious one we've ever seen, and we just can't even imagine how anybody's going to avoid catching it. So you've got to stay up on your vitamin C, take a supplement, get plenty of sleep, stay hydrated, get some extra exercise in. I've never ever heard somebody say that.
Yeah.
That had authority, that was speaking to a lot of people.
Right.
It was always, look, we're going to develop a medicine as fast as possible. Just be the first one in line and make sure that you take it, and then you'll be fine. But then there's the second, the third, the fourth. But the logic was, trust us, and
Right.
then you will be safe.
Right. We just watched, it's one of our favorite comedies, but we just watched the show Night and Day with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And his Tom Cruise, his big warning to Cameron Diaz is, if they come to you and say words like, don't worry, we're going to keep you safe, we're going to protect you,
Yeah, right.
you should automatically be afraid, because if the government's telling you that, they have a different agenda.
Yeah, and that's good, because she's the innocent doe that's like, wait, okay, I guess I believe you. But then when it happens, she's like, huh.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan famously said, I think it was this line, the 10 scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And but now we're talking. I mean, that was just at the level of a federal government. What you're describing with these NGOs, which are basically subcontracting even federal authority to this idea of international, unregulated advisory expert groups, think tanks, that are going to social engineer the world into utopia.
Yes.
And so the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, the opportunistic nature, if not more devious than that. At minimum, it was opportunistic related to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard not to connect some dots and see that there may have actually been some funneling towards certain outcomes, not just leveraging certain outcomes, to create enough crisis if people's basic moral thresholds have been compromised, if their critical thinking skills are diminished, and if the social narrative that once held civilization together is no longer there, you are talking about circumstances that are ripe for opportunism if you are powerful enough and have enough of a plan. I can't remember the author's name right now, but the quote is, a man with an organized system, a man without an organized system of thought will always be at the mercy of a man with one. And so you're seeing high levels of organization at the wealthiest levels of society, far beyond Rockefellers. And I mean, we're talking about notches above notches. And we sound so conspiratorial right now, but you have to look at the world with a certain unfiltered gaze, and that is becoming an increasingly lost ability. Well, everyone wants to just look at the most hopeful scenario.
Yeah, and I think you just have to be willing to draw conclusions.
Yeah.
And not to be like, well, I don't like that, scared me when I drew that conclusion, so I was probably wrong. Well, what if you were right? Like, and because Klaus Schwab isn't a businessman, he's a politician.
Right.
So we're not even dealing with a Rockefeller type of person that's thinking about, I want to accumulate generational wealth and I want to have, this is a person that's thinking about the world.
Yeah.
About countries. It's more of like a Medici mentality than it really is a Rockefeller mentality.
Right.
And so he comes along with this book, The Great COVID-19, The Great Reset. And I think that came out in June of 2020, but we were locked down in March of 2020. So yeah, you just gotta kind of that's a head scratcher.
Right.
That's like,
right. You can say, well, you're being conspiratorial. On the other hand, 3 months after the world is in this situation, did he really produce and publish this thoughtful examination of the issues?
Yeah.
Or was there something tracking even before?
Yeah, at a global level, eh?
Right.
And so Klaus Schwab just sees the world. My God, we're all locking down all over the world. He like lights a pipe and is just pacing, and he's like, I've got to do something about this. Starts writing it, but he's like, it's just coming, it's coming. All right. Now I need an editor. And just suddenly, bam, and it goes to the press, and somebody's like, it's bold, Klaus, but by God, we're going to publish it. Let's get it in the stores. And suddenly we have the answer.
Right.
And it also just so happens that he's the founder of the World Economic Forum. Like, I don't believe that story.
Right.
I don't believe that story. I don't believe that Bezos sold his stock in his own multi-billion-dollar company back in January of 2020 because he got lucky, and then so happens COVID and the lockdown.
Bill Gates is, buying massive tracts of farmland behind the vaccine development, and that this thing ironically came out of Wuhan, where there's a lab on coronavirus research.
But now we're allowed to say that.
Right.
You weren't allowed to say that really for the majority of the time.
Right.
You would get pulled out from YouTube, but now you can say it's okay. Like, we accept that.
Yeah.
But that's the point, is that's why it's Orwellian, because we were at war with Oceania. No, we've always loved Oceania. Right. We hate them again. Right. And your job is just to say yes, no, yes.
Right.
Yes. Whatever the current line is, that's what you think.
And
you can't keep track of the changes.
In that environment of constant fear, like, I wonder if some of the, I now we're delving into like a sociological phenomenon, as if there is a corporate brain. But ha- in that kind of an environment of constant fear, suspicion, doubt, health crisis, whatever it is, you're always looking to return to some baseline of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, in the crisis of the family, where families aren't whole and fathers aren't respected or
Mm-hmm.
given the benefit of providing comfort for their family, government becomes dad. And whatever the government says to help me feel good about things, I'm more than willing to believe.
But I think what's happening now, which is unique and it's to their benefit, although I think that's a terrible agenda, is now government is becoming mother as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The communist influence is saying, well, it has to do with gender identity, and it has to do with sexual understanding of who you are. Yeah. And you have a communist government that says, absolutely, whatever you say you are, I love you, baby. Like, that's you. Just make sure you're staying up to date on your social credit score and you're playing by the rules. And, like, we will give you whatever you need to make sure that you have the life you need to live.
Yeah.
And so kind of leaving that to the side for the moment, there is this new order that is growing in stature and respectability and trendiness, and it like China participates in the World Economic Forum. They were given access to the WHO. They got a seat at the table during COVID. That's absolutely, they literally had the virus, unleash it into the world, and they're like, come on in here, guys, tell us how you think we ought to handle this.
Right.
That happened after it's just it's so hard to just look at that plainly and say, yeah, there's not a single bad actor in there. Like, these are just people that love us.
We can trust them all.
Yeah, I should really just do what they tell me.
Right.
I shouldn't put my thinking cap on and ask a question about it. I ought to just get my fourth shot.
Right. Those 10 or 15 or 100 people that, PhDs and doctors of this and that, clearly they know what they're doing. And who doesn't want to help other people? They must want to help me.
Yeah, I heard Peterson make a good point about this. He was saying, if you don't think that there are surgeons that want to tinker with human bodies just because they're sick in the head, you're naive.
Right.
That's not most surgeons, but there are some.
Right.
So you've got to be on the
lookout
for that. Exactly. Well, because the point is, he's saying, if you don't think that there are those people and they have jobs and they're working on people that are too naive to recognize that that's their intention, maybe you just got to be really careful how naive you want to be about that.
I mean, you don't have to go very far back to the horrors of Auschwitz or Tuskegee, Mississippi.
Yes, sir. And it happened in Japan during World War II as well.
We aren't talking about some primitive time in ancient Assyria where they were all, 5,000 years ago and how horrific. This is human nature right up to the present day, and we have more capacity for that than ever at a technology level.
New tools.
Right. New tools and new justifications. Mm-hmm. Because if we're actually buying into the narrative that we're trying to prevent the next pandemic, then these experiments make sense to fortify the human genome against this, that, and the other. But while we're at it, let's discover this or try this.
Yes, exactly. And while we're trying to save the planet from the climate catastrophe, which will kill us all, maybe you shouldn't fly because you don't have a social credit score that really merits that type of pollution.
Right.
Because you can fly if you're playing by the rules, but if you're already polluting, then you shouldn't get on a plane.
Right.
Because now you're just contributing to the problem.
Yeah.
So because I don't have the caste status of a flyer, I'm not allowed to participate in the technology. Like the people that have their private planes and they're like, we need to save the planet.
Right.
Okay. You first.
Yeah.
Like I will wait.
Right.
I will wait. So I want to tie that into the great line you said about I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Why we ought to raise an eyebrow at that statement. Not because we are in the 1776 government of our founding fathers, but because we were in the Reagan era of government where he was like, it's a little different now.
Right.
I'm saying this to you.
Right.
So the way that America at least was set up to function was to be allowed to have, I guess, a common denominator of faith in the government because we knew that it was as minimum as absolutely possible. And it was only the alternative from tyranny.
Any idea of faith in government began with a fundamental distrust.
Mm-hmm.
And so the division, the tripartite, the three branches of government that took power that was consolidated in a central figure of a king,
Mm-hmm.
and it was intentionally divided because the founding fathers understood the sin nature and the ability of power to corrupt. And so they put checks and balances in and built it all at a minimalistic enough level that now you could say there is a measure of trust that can be invested in that highly skeptical system.
And they all had this book in their heads.
Right.
They really did. And now maybe they all weren't.
Even the deists who weren't Christians.
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. You can say that they didn't actually have personal faith, and that's probably fair for the ones. I'm not familiar with all of them, obviously, but I think it was Jefferson and Madison that had the idea of making the. Oh, and I'm getting the detail mixed up. They wanted to have an image of the Israelites leaving Egypt. But I can't remember why they wanted to apply that Egypt to the Constitution, because I think that's what it was. But that idea got vetoed, but they were wanting to connect the story of America's independence from the crown being akin to the Israelites in the Exodus leaving the king, the Pharaoh.
Right.
Because they were trying to say, we're doing the same thing. Like we want to serve God and be allowed to exist without just oppressive tyranny taxing us beyond comprehension, where we literally can't even establish an estate for ourselves.
Well, Peterson in the Exodus series makes the point that Exodus is, if nothing else, at a purely sociological, secular level, analyzing the text.
Mm-hmm.
If God is anything, he is a figure who is greatly interested in delivering the oppressed from the tyrant.
Yeah.
And now that operates at a spiritual level that for me as a Christian goes 10 other places.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But you have this biblical story that the founding fathers, deist, Christian or otherwise, recognized there is an emergence from tyranny
Mm-hmm.
to a place of the sovereignty of the individual
Mm-hmm.
before God.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it is, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And it is that all men are created equal,
Right.
endowed by their
Right.
creator.
Right.
And so that becomes a baseline of the value system by which it is incumbent upon us to dissent from the monopolistic, authoritarian kind of incursions of government into my personal life.
Which would require a backbone. So I can't be out there with my comfort blankie and my phone and saying, I don't like the way I'm being treated.
Right.
That's not what's going to get you the respect and the freedom that you deserve. But I think that this illusion of safety that the globalist agenda offers, like be it communist or Schwabian or whatever we're going to call it, it's saying we can take care of you.
Right.
Keep all of those things that make you feel safe, including whatever nonsense
We'll add a few
ideas you
more.
have about. Yeah, exactly. There's actually a new one that costs a little more, but that's inflation. But you can keep all of those things that make you feel good, and you don't need, like, you feel sleepy, go to sleep. You want to call off work, call off work. Like, the point isn't to adopt responsibility and to challenge yourself. It's just be safe, be at home. I just saw an ad for because my daughter's not old enough for school yet, but I'm just thinking, I'm getting an ad for a school. It's called K-12, and it's online school. And it says, I don't know what the organization is. I haven't looked into it. I just saw the ad that said, join 2 million other kids that are doing school safely at home, where they can be at their favorite place and learn with 2 million other kids safely. It's just emphasizing safe, comfort. The parents just like high-fiving the kid because the parent isn't working either. It's like your kid's just on a screen learning with 2 million other kids, but they're alone and they're trapped in their house and they're not going outside. That's where you have to look up and say, what am I doing? Something is convincing me to stay indoors.
Yeah.
And it's convincing me to not work and to be at home and to just be looking at a screen, and that's an education. And,
Right.
And that's preferable. We're not even in COVID right now. And it's just saying, go ahead and do it.
Right.
Like school is starting. Just enroll your kid in this. You're allowed to do that. But in some places, you're not really allowed to homeschool. Like it kind of depends on if you're homeschooling the right way or not. But if you're just on the computer, like that's government sanctioned. That's actually great.
Right.
So it had me thinking about the part of Christ's story where he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and he's I don't want to say he's afraid of the future. That was just a word that came to my mind. It's like his soul is gripped.
Yeah.
And he is praying, Lord, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but thou will be done. So he is still willing. I will do what I need to do. But Lord, could we change our mind? Is there any other way? And he brings with him his disciples and instructs them, sit here while I go over there and pray. And then, at least in Matthew, he then takes further with him up the hill, Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and tells them, my soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me. So as the story goes, they don't keep watch. They fall asleep. Their eyes are heavy, for their eyes were heavy. But he comes and finds them and says, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Well, now the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. And I think, because I'm kind of saying that from my memory while I glance at it, but I think there was actually 2 times where, yes, it does say that. There was more than one time where he comes and finds the disciples sleeping and says, wake up. One of the times he says, keep watching and praying that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So then he goes away and comes back and they fell asleep again. So even with that personal challenge from Jesus, the exhortation, wake up and pray. The hour isn't like, this is the time. This is not the time to be sleepy. I know you're sleepy. The Bible describes their eyes being heavy. So is every time that we feel sleepy a time where we say, good, the Lord is bringing rest to me and now I can rest? Here's a time where they want to go to sleep. And Jesus is saying, wake up and keep watch. You're falling into temptation. That I'm trying to tie that back into what we were saying just a little bit ago about the illusion of safety and the comfort blankets that we have and the promise of it's going to be easier in the future. It's going to be so much easier. You're going to have it in your DNA and it's going to be a Bluetooth to your phone and you don't even have to think about it. It will just monitor your health. If something's wrong, it will tell you. You won't have to second guess anything. You can just stay up to date on everything. We'll have your records. We can do proactive health. We can use AI to model your genome in a unique way that allows us to take away some of the weight you've gained and to make sure that you don't have this thing that you have a 10% probability for. We just scare you enough to sell you the solution, and then you're fine and you're fine. And to me, that makes my mind go to Jesus saying, this is not the hour to let slumber come to your eyes.
Right.
This is the hour to keep watch that you may not give in to temptation.
Right. No, I'm just pondering because if you go back, a little bit before, you're in Matthew 26, you go back to Matthew 25, and it starts with the parable of the 10 virgins. And you have these ideas. Then you go back to Matthew 24, and it's the context of the return, and you have just different vignettes that are basically the need to be watchful. Watch and pray. No man knows the hour, like a thief in the night. In other words, it's not a time for a laissez-faire attitude. It's so easy to slip into a slumbering posture because there's too many variables. Okay, if we can't know the day or the hour, then we just trust it's going to happen as it needs to. And I'm extrapolating on your point. But it is in the context of the uncertainty, that is the reason to stay watchful. In the context of the challenge or the difficulty, the idea of entering into his sufferings, bearing burdens with him, whether it is watching for him or bearing burdens with him, that is not a slumbering state. It's an active, vigilant kind of participation in the process.
Yeah, it's like maybe it's peaceful vigilance, but it's definitely vigilant.
Yeah,
it's definitely alertness.
Not meant to be fearful, but it's certainly not meant to be passive.
Yeah, and stewarding, because there's the virgins and then the talents. That's the next parable, isn't it? Yeah, it goes from the virgins to the talents. So the virgins are saying, well, because all the virgins rose and trimmed their lamps in 25 verse 8 in Matthew. The foolish said to the prudent, give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the prudent answered, saying, no, there will not be enough for us and you. So go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves.
Right.
Now I can just hear I can hear a modern American one of those more extreme liberal Democrats just saying that's such an outdated, like that's so not the way we do things anymore. Right. If you've got something, you ought to give it. That's how this game works now. This is what globalism is all about. We are all here to help each other.
Right.
You have more than I do. I need that right now.
Right.
I am being victimized by you, and you're using your privilege against me.
Right.
But the prudent are saying to the foolish. That's the point. That's how it's framed.
Right.
The prudent know we need this. You should have had it, but you were foolish. So now it's your task to go and get it for yourself.
You're on the same timeline as me during the period of vigilant preparation.
Yes, exactly. So it's too late for me to share with you. That's why we're here having this conversation.
I mean, at a different level, I would say also that parable begs the point. I can't actually wake you up.
Mm-hmm.
I can't actually give you oil.
Yeah, because deep down there's that lack of awareness. There's a lack of it, because it ends where the Lord says, or they're saying, Lord, Lord, open up for us, but he's saying, truly I tell you, I do not know you.
Right. There is an idea of personal responsibility in this, because we're having this conversation. We hope others join in the intellectual and spiritual pursuit of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for us to have this is to suggest to ourselves, we have our own awakening. Yeah, I still need to keep waking up, but I can't wake anyone but myself up.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's very crucial.
The 5 virgins can't go, the 5 foolish ones can't go to the 5 who had their oil and receive anything that they haven't actually pursued for themselves.
Yeah, because that point is to say it uses 10 to represent wholeness, but then it splits them to say there's 5 and 5, but each person has their own light. So it's not like the 5 share a light and the other 5 share a light.
Yeah.
They each are responsible for their own awakening and for their own faith.
I mean, this is self-serving in one sense, but the person who looks at this and says, that's just conspiratorial claptrap or whatever. Well, okay, I can't give you oil in this.
Yeah.
If I am seeing connections and I'm feeling prompted and I'm pursuing something and a understanding and a concern, and that's we're really taking the passage and running with it now in a sense.
Yeah.
But I can do that for myself. But if someone looking on at that says, I don't believe any of that, okay, then you go get your own oil. Whatever that is for you, get it. Because there is a time coming where we're past the point of gathering intelligence at that point. We have to act on what we have. And so if we are right, then those that look at this conversation as folly are not going to be happy in that hour of testing. And if we're wrong, then we're in the wrong conversation and we need to wake up.
Yeah, it does have to deal with how we're framing the narrative. So this parable is taking place at the time when 10 virgins are going out to meet the bridegroom. So they believe that it is imminent and that their job is to be ready.
Right.
So it's not like, that's a year away. And within the parable,
right.
They're not saying it's so far away that, we can share some oil. We'll be generous, and then we'll go to the market in the morning. They're saying it's time to be ready right now.
Right.
And they're prudent.
Right.
So within that framing, they're the ones that actually are, they're correctly perceiving the time.
Right.
And then the foolish are not perceiving the time correctly. So they're asking, hey, can we get some oil because we don't have enough? And the prudent are saying it's too late for that.
Yeah.
Like that ship has sailed, basically, is what they're saying.
Yes.
You can go get some.
Yeah.
But that means you're going to leave and we're not going to leave. And that's why we're not sharing with you what we have. Because it is about personal responsibility and saying, this is the time to act this way. So I can't do what I know is improper for me, but I want the best for you. But I can't sacrifice what I know to be the case for myself to justify your foolishness.
Well, I mean, to break it down, like these conversations we've been having before we started filming it, and where I feel it going in my own soul. I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, but I am trying to figure out how I adapt counterculturally in a way that some people could call, well, I don't want to get into that. I'm trying to figure out what this means for me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have this conversation so that it's thoughtful enough. I'm not just reacting,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to presume that conversation is enough.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, I'm going to have a sense of obedience to God, responsibility to my family, and for my own well-being and those around me. I'm going to have to make some decisions to adjust the course of what I consider normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's got to be pragmatic at some point.
Yeah. So this isn't just a mental exercise,
Right.
but the mental exercise is part of the oil process. I'm pressing and squeezing the ideas, the olives, if you will, to get to the point where I'm like, okay, now I know what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't just come like that.
Yeah.
In the moment of testing or difficulty, I can't give someone what I've spent 3 years working through and the choices I made in response to that. And so, I mean, that's a fitting spiritual application as disciples on multiple levels. But just in terms of kind of the more common struggle we all have right now to figure out, how much am I going to allow these outside forces, NGOs, these other forces to define my dictionary, my vocabulary, my thought process, my way of engaging.
Where does my help come from?
Right.
Psalm 2, where is it coming from?
Right. There in Daniel 11, most of the translations, and I think I might have mentioned this, but it's the passage about the abomination of desolation, the idea of the Antichrist figure. But there's the famous line, those with insight will shine brightly and do exploits.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the passages say exploits. And within Christian circles, there's a certain idea of the exploits as being kind of, the miracles and dramatic events like Jesus demonstrated, that we're doing dramatic, miraculous kind of things. I like that. I believe it. But others look at the context and say, those with insight will shine brightly and resist him.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the exploits require the courage of a resistant soul to the pressures of the Antichrist spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all so strong, so domineering, so convincing, so reasonable. At some point, there is a certain framework where all of these things, why wouldn't I want 4 COVID shots? Why wouldn't I want a minimum guaranteed income? Why wouldn't I want that robot to do the job that is good, common, honest, decent labor for me, but I don't have to do it and I can get paid for it to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And all these things, why wouldn't I? Sounds like we're going someplace.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes courage to resist that while you can, because there comes a point where that noose is too tight and you can't get the rope off your neck anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there is there's that enclosing. It's tightening.
Yeah.
That process is happening where the more that I'm looking right here, I'm gonna be blind to whatever's coming in at all sides. I'm just like, this is the whole world right here. This is the story that I believe in. So the less I pay attention to this, the more I'm gonna look up and maybe see a world I don't recognize too well.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna look to here for answers.
Right.
Which is the same thing I'm doing here. But the difference is this is a book. This is a digital technology.
Right.
So I don't like that the people who are running the show these days, which are the WEFs and the WHOs and what have yous, are saying, this is reliable. This phone, source of information, that's how you stay up to date. I don't like that. I would like it if they were like one of my college professors. It's like, well, that's a pretty good question, Hanson. I can give you 3 book recommendations.
Right.
And then we can have a better conversation about it.
Right.
But it sounds like you don't really know how to ask the question well yet.
Right.
No, they're saying like, oh, everything you need to know is right here.
Right. Actually, it's a profound insight in my mind, the idea of the continually refreshed, approved truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so keep looking at that, because this is what's whoops. Now this is what's true. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Whew. Okay, this is what's true.
Yeah.
And that keeps changing. And the fact that it keeps changing actually makes us dependent on more dependent on, I need to know what the latest, greatest truth is.
Yeah, it's how you get tethered.
I need to know what is the update. I'm now dependent on my GPS. I don't know how to actually get around that traffic jam.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully, Waze is constantly
Mm-hmm.
updating the route
Mm-hmm.
so that I can get around.
Yeah.
And that is the Wikipedia article. That's the news headline. It's constantly, the terms are changing, the narrative is changing, but it's all being guided by these benevolent forces that are keeping me in the know. Meanwhile, you have this idea that is laughed at now of an eternal truth that I open that book and it actually never changes. It doesn't refresh to my taste
Mm-hmm.
or to the whims of culture, but that's called antiquated and irrelevant. And somehow the thing that constantly changes is relevant.
I know, and for that matter, the legacy of Abraham, we have that in common with the Muslims and with the Jews. We have that in common, that we're rooted in something that doesn't change. And I just think that is becoming way more relevant than the shifting sands of political affiliation. It's like, where can I just look around and find some people that will at least open up the book?
Right.
And we can talk about that. We can talk about it.
Right.
We can figure out what we agree on and how we can build community together. But at least we see that eye to eye. And I think that's more relevant than even. Well, do you see where I'm going with that?
I do.
Like, it's.
I mean, the postmodern abandonment of objective truth
Exactly.
is part of what has set the stage for the entire mess we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
If everything is subjective according to my preference, my comfort, and the constant refresh of the latest, greatest data, I mean, you see this on the one hand. The scientific pursuit should be willing to update itself. That's right.
It was truly scientific.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not concerned about the data changing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about the terms of truth
Mm-hmm.
always being subject to outside manipulation. And so the idea that somehow this thing that keeps changing can keep being true. It's one thing for the facts of science to change,
Mm-hmm.
but truth and facts aren't necessarily the same thing.
Oh, I get your point. Yeah.
It's kind of like your square and rectangle analogy.
Yeah.
Every truth has facts, but not every fact is true. Because if you only have one fact, but not these three other facts, you might not have all the facts. And so there are limitations to what that can add up to in terms of what is true.
Yeah, not to mention the measuring device itself might give you the fact. You're like, this is hard science. Here's what it measured. But then that suddenly gets tweaked and it's like, okay, well, this is the new fact.
Right.
Like, that was a fact until it wasn't.
Right.
But then the truth will be platonic in that way. It will be the form. It will be the ultimate thing that's beautiful and good.
Which is why the idea of a timeless document that's divinely inspired is actually the most relevant thing we can turn to at a time when everything else is just shifting constantly.
Yeah, it's not. I used to think of it as when I was coming to faith, and I'm thinking, oh, so this is the antidote to nihilism. And now I'm thinking that's really backwards. Like, this is reality, and then nihilism is the poison that converts your thinking into, this is just one of a trillion books.
Right.
And so it's all propaganda.
Right.
Anything written down is propaganda.
One of my favorite illustrations of the idea of essentially we can tie this back to the idea of the knowledge of good and evil, and now we're talking about truth and facts.
Mm-hmm.
But Western society has been raised with a Greek mindset that became increasingly linear in how we interpret data. So, and I there's value in this. I'm not diminishing that, but we go to school and you learn 2 + 2 = 4. And so 5 - 3 is 2. Those are facts. That's true. But if you ask a 9-year-old product of that system there's 5 birds on a telephone wire. You throw a rock and hit one and knock one off. How many birds are left? They're going to do math in an abstract way. 5 minus 1 equals 4. You go ask a 12-year-old African boy who grew up in the bush, there's 5 birds in a tree. You throw a rock and knock one off. How many birds are there? He's going to say 0.
Yep.
And that answer is equally true in a way that is grounded in reality that the abstract mathematical equation can't answer.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to get at is truth.
Right. Which answer is truer?
Right.
4 or none, because the birds all flew away.
Right.
So I think to further...
And it wouldn't make sense to him to say there's 4 left.
Wait, like, this is such a stupid question.
Yeah, you couldn't convince him that there's 4 left. Every bird is gone.
Right. And
every bird is gone.
So I think the best that postmodern liberalism does to that end is it tries to say, you know what, that kid's perspective is right. So if he gets that question in school and he doesn't answer it right, but he can justify himself, we should honor that.
Yeah.
But then they're like, because otherwise we're being racist. And it's like, well, really, philosophically, that's not really racism. It's more just, that's actually a bad question.
Yeah.
And because when you think about it, when you stop and think, you're going to get the answer 0.
Right.
But the point is, we want kids not stopping and thinking. We want them just fitting the mold.
Right.
So here you're doing a math assignment and it's homework. And so we don't want you to really think about what's going on in the story. We just want you to see 5 and 4 jump out at you, or 5 and 1 jump out at you, and then conclude to 4. But we don't want you considering what would really be happening in this world that the problem is describing.
Right.
And that is what you were saying, like way at the beginning, about we're losing the ability to have critical thinking as just a normal thing that we're capable of doing. It's like, you said something weird to me, I'm gonna stop and think about that before I respond. Instead I'm gonna be like, well, he probably meant this, I'll go with that.
Yeah.
And I'm making an assumption, and maybe that's not what you meant, and either way I'm still damaging my own integrity, because I'm probably misunderstanding you, but I'm like, well, but he probably thinks what I think, which is super egotistical. But it's like, because we're all on the same team and we all think that we should be flying a certain flag and celebrate. We just have this illusion that because we're all united in our politics, that means that we're all serving the best in each other.
Right.
But it really depends on what your politics are.
Yeah.
And we don't agree right now. Like, there's plenty of people that see it the way that you and I do, which is like, I don't really trust the way that things are going.
Right.
And I don't really like the fact that it takes a Donald Trump figure to be a bull in a china shop, but like, at least it happened.
Right.
But there's plenty of people that feel that way.
Right.
And then the split is with the people that are like, how dare any of our precious China be, no pun intended,
right,
be broken before our eyes.
Yeah.
And so how can we look eye to eye with one another and find common ground? I would hope that this would do it.
Yeah.
I would hope that we could find something that is way, way, way apolitical. It's just the truth. And then we can do what our founding fathers did in America, which is, how can we honorably come from the spirit of the word and look at politics?
Yeah.
But this is not saying you have to be Republican.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No,
like, that's
absolutely not. It would argue against many of the Republican tenets and against, yeah. So the point isn't the Republican or Democrat.
Right.
It is finding a story, a narrative that taps into a deeper truth
Mm-hmm.
and gives us a way to talk about things without arguing over the lesser things.
Right, because in lieu of a narrative, I think the internet becomes the narrative, which the internet is not a narrative. But
it's a moving target, right? Yeah.
Right. At best,
it's the illusion of a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The narrative is what's next, not
Mm-hmm.
that there is a story that we fit inside.
Yeah.
It's just what's next. What's next?
Yeah.
And there is no connection to meaning when the only question is what's next. What is this unto is a very different question than what's next.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm tracking with you. It also just makes you not live in the present, because you're almost like, what you become vigilant for is what I don't know that's in the future that is going to make me look like out of touch, or
that goes back to the Gethsemane story. And again, we're taking a precious story there that has 5 really important things to say, in terms of how we relate to the Lord. But what he was saying in part was, be present with me. What he was saying in part was, be watchful in this dark hour. There are other things happening. There's other forces at play. And I want you watchful and present with me for where this is going.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing as the parable of the virgins. Maybe even with the talents as well, because when the master returns and finds the guy that just hid 1 talent, he's saying that wasn't the time to save.
Right.
I gave you the talent to use it.
Right.
So it's there, at least at a broad level, the theme is discerning the hour.
Right.
And then behaving accordingly, even if it's countercultural, even if it's offensive to the foolish, even if your eyes are heavy and you really would rather sleep.
Yeah.
I've been noticing times where I struggle falling asleep, and it isn't until I finally get on my knees and pray that then I can go to bed with peace. And that's really not to say about me. I'm trying to say I think there are times when we really do feel the leading to pray and to engage in what's going on spiritually, lest we fall into temptation.
Yeah.
And for me personally, sometimes I was like, but I'm just so tired. But then I end up just tossing and turning in bed.
Right, for an hour.
Yeah. And so it's like, even when you just think about it purely practically, it's like, well, I had time to do that.
Right.
And then maybe I would have gone to bed sooner. But still, what that's just been doing in my own heart is like, why am I like, it feels like giving into temptation is, I guess what I'm trying to say, is that it feels like it would just be easier to fall asleep than to have to sit awake and think about people I know that are having a hard time and to find the words to pray for them because I'm really tired and I really do want to go to sleep. So there, but even then there's the time where like, and I think it's in Mark, where I just thought it was interesting that when Jesus goes to Peter and he calls him Simon, and it's like, Simon, I told you to be awake. That was interesting that he's like, by your old name, like, I have changed you. Right. So Simon, why is Simon not awake and watchful and falling into temptation?
Never even saw that.
Yeah, there's something about that, the decaying into the old when we fall into temptation.
Right.
But in the present is the knowledge of the hour that would allow us to engage in proper behavior.
Right. Being
oriented properly.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult when you've got a lot of, even just, it feels like your physiology is just, my eyes are heavy and I'm really, really anxious. And so I don't know how to slow down and pray right now. I need to think through this problem before I can let go of it and then enter into prayer.
Well, gosh, man, I think I don't know how far to go down these rabbit holes, but even just the pace, the frenetic pace that technology enables. I ponder a guy like Enoch who walked with God. Mm-hmm. But what does that say about the lifespan was almost 1,000 years old, right? And they didn't have all these distractions. I mean, what is there about the more meditative, thoughtful kind of life, the things that doesn't, this is kind of embarrassing, but we all do it. I take my phone with me to the bathroom.
Savannah showed me a meme about that the other day. It's like when you go to the bathroom, realize you forgot your phone, because the point is you panic. You're like, right. Oh no, what am I going to do?
Right. And, for thousands of years, people have pooped and peed without needing something to occupy their
savages,
thoughts. Right?
Barbarians.
So we have this weird construct that is constantly distracted. Mm-hmm. Now we would say informed, but I can't string two thoughts together without referencing the refresh on my own, with this now built-in kind of pressure of what am I missing? And the binge-worthy TV shows, you can go right down the line, the day trading platform, the customize my music channel. everything is so bent towards filling every moment with something that the ability to have a simple solitary, uninterrupted thought of any substance is threatening.
You have kids now doing, they call them dopamine fasts.
Yeah.
Because that's just how desperate literal children are. These are minors on, like I saw one of them. There's a young kid on YouTube and he's like, I'm gonna do a 30-day dopamine fast. Now I'm thinking in my head the whole time, you've got 2 million subscribers.
Right.
And so it's convenient for you that you'll know at the end of it, you'll get 2 million likes and look like a hero.
Yeah.
But so he's like, and he's filming himself the whole time. So there's all of those things going into it. But still, he's like, I want to deprive myself of why I'm feeling so good because I can tell I've got too much of it in my system.
Right.
So he talks to a doctor and the doctor's like, I haven't really heard of this, but like it kind of makes sense. And it just had me thinking that still it would take something like a sacrifice. Not like maybe he wasn't doing his in the right spirit, but the point is I need to be willing to give up what's most valuable to me at this time to really become the better version of myself in the future.
Yeah.
And that's why I was making the point about alcoholism, even like the difference between alcohol and meth. It's not like last time we were talking, because it's not just having something that like makes you feel good, but maybe it's causing a problem. There's a categorical difference between somebody sipping on beer and somebody smoking on meth. Categorical difference.
Right.
One of them is going to be so immediately degenerative in your like your brain matter will literally reduce in size.
Right.
That's not going to grow back.
Right.
There's not a therapy you can do that's going to change that.
Yeah.
Your teeth will literally fall out. Your skin will literally become yellow.
Yeah.
So if you get to that point, yes, you can cling to faith and you can like wake up and repent and change. You can always do that. But your body will keep the score of that mistake.
Right.
And that's what I think your point is about, how frenetic the pace is and how much we're just becoming like, it's I just see it coming into us.
Right.
It's like the digital is consummating with the analog, but that's this unholy, uneven yoking where like, I mean, in the Torah, you can't yoke the ox with the donkey. It's unfair for one.
Right.
And so what happens when we, as real natural people, yoke ourselves with the digital?
The Imago Dei, a biological, spiritual construct.
Play the theme song.
With something that is inherently non-existent.
Right. And we give up ourselves, what we would be doing naturally, and we allow that to replace it. Good. I'm on the toilet and now I can be on my phone.
Right.
And now whatever I would have been doing otherwise is totally replaced with what this allows me to do. And then the more time that I spend doing that in the rest of my life, the less that I am me and the more that I am me plus this. But that's the idolatry metaphor, is we give up we open ourselves to the foreigner.
The thing.
Yeah, exactly. We become the thing. And in this case, like literally, they call it the Internet of Things. Going back to WF, they literally call it the Internet of Things. And they want to use that with AI and with CRISPR technology that can reprogram your genes at the level where it replicates itself within you. Now that's a spiritual transformation, because we don't actually know what's happening at the genetic level, but we know so much that we think that we can do something like that, and it's only going to do what we say it's going to do.
Yeah, but Hanson, that comes with the benefit of my refrigerator knowing I've moved from 5 oranges to 3 oranges. And so it's going to order more oranges for me, and I don't have to miss out.
Yeah, I don't have to log off.
Amazon ships, and they've got their drone service is beginning. It drops right on my doorstep. I don't have to walk more than 10 steps to my door for a product I didn't order because my refrigerator thought for me and ordered for me. And so all of that benefit is wrapped up in this more nefarious, suggestive thing you're talking about, but I want oranges.
Well, and that's where you would have to decide what story is more believable to you. Mm-hmm. You know, is that really the story that you want? Like, would you yourself as a father hope that I lived that life as your son? Would that make you just like tear up with pride? And hate? Good for Hanson. Look at him.
He got a new refrigerator.
And is ordering the orange.
And
Yeah, there's no adventure in that.
Right.
And so, but the thing is, like how you had mentioned Peterson saying that he's framing psychologically, the God in the Old Testament is the spirit that allies itself with with the emergence from tyranny.
The emancipation process for the oppressed into freedom.
The adventure, which is go into the wilderness to serve me.
Right.
It is not go and be free and take your clothes off and do a dance.
Yeah.
It's go serve me in the wilderness.
Right.
That's what you're free unto.
Right.
Is service to the Lord.
Right.
So I think Bob Dylan said, you got to serve somebody.
Got to serve somebody.
So if we choose who we're going to serve, then there was going to be a consequence for that.
Well, but the anarchist is going to say, no, I don't. And that becomes...
With his punk haircut and his black leather.
Right.
I don't serve anything. I don't have a problem.
Right. Completely defined by the image of the anarchist.
Exactly who he serves.
And so the idea that I don't have to do that only makes me vulnerable to the sophistication of the power that will still enslave me.
Yes.
But convince me I'm not enslaved.
You will be enslaved. It's like the bully that stands behind the bigger bully. But he's like, oh,
Right.
I'm a bully. It's like, you're a little bitch. You're not a bully.
Right.
You are standing behind the guy who has the power. And you're like, me too. I'm that guy.
Right.
So you're always subservient to somebody that's at the top.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what game you're playing.
And part of my point also is not just that exists, but the more you deny that exists, the more susceptible you are to being controlled.
Right. So that's kind of the problem of naivete, isn't it?
Yeah.
The more that you want to act like that doesn't exist.
Maybe it's naivete, but I would say it's pride. I mean, I would say it is
willful ignorance.
Yeah, it's that thing that bows up in humanity to say, I will not bow to anything. Therefore, the only safe thing for me to bow to, I won't, which exposes me to every other thing that more skillfully makes me bow.
Mm-hmm.
You will serve somebody.
Yeah, prideful ignorance. When you would say, no, I won't.
Right.
I'll serve myself, or I'll do whatever I want
I'm
to do. I'm
strong enough. I'm smart enough. Those are ancient stories. It's a myth written long ago, a made-up spaghetti monster, all that stuff. And you don't even realize that you are becoming shackled to the will of other systems that are feeding that pride.
Yeah, that probably ties in well to a lot of doctors that find themselves in this situation where, and I said doctors, but I'm thinking honestly of scientists and people that are contributing to that larger corporate international infrastructure that's facilitating the integration of the internet things into the human genome and all of these AI technologies and Neuralink and all of this stuff. And there's people that might not like where that's headed, but I'm just capturing the data, you know, like I'm just doing my job.
Right.
So that's maybe like what I'm doing is so important and I need this job and it's good money and I believe in some of the things that they're doing, but I won't think too much about like where this could go wrong. You know, like I'm just going to keep my head down and stay focused. But above, like where you're not willing to look, way up high in the Elysium stratosphere of where these rich technocrats live, they do have a plan. Yeah. And they are talking with each other. Yeah. And they're considering how can we ally ourselves in a way that maximizes our control when this stuff comes to a head. Right. Because like COVID is an example of it coming to a head. It doesn't mean like there's going to be the final thing that happens and then all bets are off. It just means whenever there are these big power clashes in the earth, we're at a place of technological integration now. Anybody that's plugged into the internet is connected with one another. Well, yeah. Well, I was just saying like what happens in China or what happens in Ukraine or what happens in South Africa, those might not have been relevant to America even 100 years ago. Right. Like might not have been super relevant. But now it's like living in LA, any time there was a cultural, I can't remember all the countries we would have to fly flags for, hanging out of the car. For one, it was for Armenia. And I'm thinking, it's okay, like we support them. But I'm also just, as a citizen, I'm like, I'm seeing some of y'all with an Armenian flag. You do not look Armenian. Right. I have a feeling you read a news article and you're like, this is what we do now. Yeah, right. And so that's the point is like, that's on your mind. You probably don't know anybody from there. You probably don't actually know what's happening there. You probably don't have a nuanced opinion on it. You just saw the headline and now you're showing that you're woke. Well, yeah. I mean, I got refreshed. And this is the new cause. This is the story. Right. This is the cause. This is what I do as a proper citizen. Right. So it's less rooted in actually what your life is and what your home looks like and what your family looks like. It's like, well, I don't talk to my dad because I hate my dad and I never liked my mom and I don't talk to my siblings and I canceled but Armenia.
Right.
And you like, that's what you really care about.
No, the so much of what passes for social justice and engaged citizenry now is simply uh, moral mercenaries
More mercenaries. That's
who
great.
don't actually have a guiding ethos or principle.
Mm-hmm.
They're just committed to whatever the refresh says they're supposed to care about.
Right.
And that proves they're a passionate, engaged, woke citizen.
Yeah.
And they could move between inherently opposite commitments and not even see the discrepancy.
Right. Because what they're it's because they're doing the right thing.
Sure.
You know, it doesn't have to make sense to me.
Yeah.
I know that I am doing the right thing by staying informed.
Yeah.
But this is the information source.
And they don't even realize how much they're being co-opted.
Right.
I mean, I can't remember her name, Greta Thunberg or...
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, something. Yeah. And you have a 14-year-old girl who all of a sudden is commanding the leaders of the world with her social climate vision.
But I think it's because she was saying the right thing. You know what I mean?
She was saying the script that was put in front of her.
Well, right. That's what I mean.
But my point in that is that's not her original thought where she's saying, this is who I am. She had a little bit of a thought and 10 people jumped in and said, think this too, and now you're our prop. Mm-hmm. And she becomes an icon of the moral mercenary, but I'm not, you couldn't convince me that she is this pioneering, visionary 14-year-old, articulator of the New World Order. Mm-hmm. She had a few good thoughts and became the pawn in a much larger story.
Well, and you get caught up in the fervor, and when you get validated for that, it's like, why would you stop doing that?
Right.
Because you're being conditioned. And so when I fly the right flag, and then people give me nods and people honk and people, it's like, yeah, that's why I keep doing this. I'm constantly being socially ratified, whatever my behavior is. It's either in favor or it's out of favor. And so depending on geographically where I live and what the spirit of the age is or what the political climate looks like, that's adjusting me unless I'm aware that that's happening. And then I can decide, how do I want to act in this moment?
Yeah.
Do I want to go along with what people are doing, or do I want to act in a different way that wouldn't necessarily map onto their worldview?
Yeah.
And when people look at the internet and say that's what the world is, I think, like you're saying, they become props because there are people who literally run the internet. It's not hocus pocus to imagine that there's a wizard behind the curtain. Right. There is literally companies that choose what is on the internet, and the government has a say in it, and the NGOs have a say in it, and they decide what you look at in your algorithm.
Oh,
there's no such thing as, I Google and then the right answer comes to me.
Yeah,
it'll tell you. Well, the end of my point was it'll tell you like it just loaded 10 billion search queries in less than 0.0002 seconds. And then top 3 are ads.
Yeah.
And then the next 3 are like the right organizations that you've probably heard of before. So how is Google rank ordering 10 billion searches in 0.2 to whatever seconds? It's because the algorithm is deciding what you see. The algorithm is tweaked by engineers, which are mechanics that are saying, here's how this engine needs to run. And all of that is being facilitated by the C-suite people that say, here's what makes us look good.
Right.
And this is how we ensure that we are still bottom line oriented. So it's fiscal policy dictated by corporate overlords that manage engineering decisions that affect what I do when I look at my phone and say, I better stay inside today. It says there's a heat wave coming.
Right.
But all of that is being facilitated by this infrastructure. And so like it's 115 degrees outside. I went out on a run.
Yeah.
Like I didn't check my phone and say, oh, well, it says a heat warning. And it says maybe if I might stay inside. I'll just stay inside. Right. You know, like that. It just primes you to think, God, it's probably hot outside. Just go out and run. Just prove to yourself.
It's the frog in the pot thing. I don't really believe that Google started with the kind of overlord mentality.
Oh, no way. Yeah, no way.
So it had a good run of being surprised at its own success, and then it had to figure out how to monetize it. when it just started as a true innovation that had utility. And so it gained public trust for a long period of time where we weren't concerned about how the algorithm was shaping our thought or selectively feeding us answers. The algorithm worked in giving us what we needed to get to when the internet grew from 10 articles to 10 billion articles.
Yeah.
And it was skillful in sifting to find what we wanted, not to determine what we were fit to read.
Well, and I think it was just so novel, and it made it so much easier
Sure.
that you weren't using Google and thinking like, as a scholar, am I really being given the perfect piece of information? You're just
Right.
like, this is so cool, and that makes sense. It's like, it's just good enough. It's good enough thinking happens really quick.
But 10 or so years into it, there's a trust factor
Yeah.
that it still rides on. We would look at traditional media with all kinds of skepticism because we know in the boardrooms where they're deciding what's going to run on the front page and what's the angle of this story. We aren't even in the realm of journalism anymore where you just report the story. It is
What a concept.
What's the angle on this story.
Yeah.
So the editorials isn't a section anymore. The whole paper is an editorial. And they have tables to interpret, okay, the Republican convention just happened, or the fires in Hawaii just happened. What's the angle we're going to take?
Yeah, exactly.
And so now we read the newspapers as if it's algorithmic. They're determining what they want us to think. But Google, there's illusion of objectivity to it because that article in the newspaper has a person's name on it.
Yeah.
And so we can associate it with a person.
Yeah.
The algorithm is a digital artifact. And so we don't think it's being manipulated at the highest levels, even though we read articles every now and then how Apple or Google or whoever are making these conciliatory gestures in China. They've agreed to strip out these sort of search terms, that they won't return these answers because the market in China is too big for them to ignore. It's too important to their bottom line. So they make algorithmic decisions for what passes in their search engine. And we say, well, that's China. That's not right. And that's not right of them to do. And then we turn it on and we don't even realize it's happening here too. And the Chinese media is talking about what they're filtering for us.
Truly. And you're right. None of these things started as some evil weapon designed to... I don't even think Larry Fink built Aladdin as an evil weapon. I just think he's like, I just lost a bunch of money. I'm trying to innovate. And so how can I make Aladdin better so that I can manage a better hedge fund? And
right.
Zuckerberg didn't start Facebook because he was like licking his chops and saying, man, I'm about to make $1 billion and then I'm going to decide who gets to see what president actually... But that's what ended up happening with Facebook is the federal government's talking to Facebook and saying, hey, you're about to get a story. It's going to be all over the internet. Just be on the lookout for it. It's fake news and don't allow it to be published. Right. So Facebook had to find the way to say, now I'm talking about when the laptop came out and it was during the election cycle.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, Trump is a part of this like Russian media propaganda on Twitter that's influencing the election, and that's Trump's problem. In real life, we know now, the federal government was influencing Facebook's decision to, can't remember the term for it, but it's where
minimize.
They downvoted whatever their process is. It's like somebody publishes that and we either outrightly take it down or we bury it in the algorithm, as they say.
You can't find it if you tried.
Right, which absolutely influence the election results.
Sure.
Because if I'm trying to think, is there any merit to this crazy conspiracy or not?
Right.
And I Google it or I search on Facebook, I'm like, well, it's not on here.
Yeah.
Well, it's not on here. Oh, well, what it is on there, it's saying it's fake news. Oh, I guess it's fake news.
Right.
It's real news.
Right.
But when I'm looking for what the real news is on my phone, then that is how I decide what the truth is. Yeah. What am I allowed to be shown? That must be what the truth is. And that's where we fall into this, where we just become props of whatever the politics of the time is, because I'm only allowed to think what the phone will populate to me.
Right.
So I'm not allowed to think the virus came from Wuhan until I am allowed to think the virus came from Wuhan.
Right.
So as long as I'm following that spatiotemporally, like I don't think it and then I do think it, then I'm good, then I really accept the truth.
Well, then
The
you're a good
empirical
citizen.
truth. Then I'm a great citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a card carrying citizen. Just like I'm following all of the rules.
Right.
I'm doing it exactly the right way.
And you have an entire
by not doing anything.
generation of progressive-minded moral mercenaries who that is their definition of what it means to be a good human and a good citizen is compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's interesting. This is maybe too big to get into now, but it's the idea of substitute values and words for truly biblical ideas. So submission is a biblical value. Submission to God.
Mm-hmm.
Compliance is a inferior value.
Oh yeah, I see.
But it has the same kind of trappings.
Yeah, it's kind of got the same ring to it.
Right. Tolerance, that apex value, tolerance, has been conflated with love. If I love people, I'm going to be tolerant.
Yeah.
But it's really a replacement for love that speaks the truth.
Because it also, like Ecclesiastes 3, there's a time and a place for everything. But I love how much detail it gives to all the different emotions and seasonal varieties of the human experience, because they're like, for the 10 virgins, the time for them was not to share, to be prudent.
Right.
But what about when the foolish come and are opposite you and say, what are you doing? Like, this is the time, share with me.
Right.
But there's something about the prudent person that is saying, I know what my role is here, and you're contradicting that directly, which must mean that we are not on the same team. Right. And you have to be willing to acknowledge that we can't all be on the same team all the time. It really matters how we're acting. So if I am, well, I was just trying to further your point by saying that unless I am willing to do what feels right inside of me, and I'm really motivated by integrity, and like I want to do the right thing, and I'm not just placating and doing the moral mercenary game, but I really am in the spirit of truth, looking to the future and trying to orient myself properly, then I have to accept that I'm going to find enemies along the way. Right. And I can't then look to myself and say, well, I shouldn't have any enemies. Yeah. Like, I should love everybody that I see. And if I see somebody I don't love, what does that say about me? Right. What's that saying about my prejudice and my bias? And it's like, you're going to find people that you do not agree with. And it really matters how you treat them. But there's something to be said for the spirit of hospitality and something to be said for the spirit of prudence. Right. It just depends. That wasn't very hospitable of the virgins to not share their oil. But they knew this is not the time for hospitality. This is the time for prudent vigilance. The hour has come. Yeah,
if again, the Orwellian idea of redefining terms, and by definition, if you're redefining terms, ostensibly the point is to redefine the values or ideas the terms control.
Sure, yeah, that's what you'll do.
And so acceptance is a biblical idea. God accepts us in our sin, our weakness, our failure, but he doesn't tolerate those things that would keep us from our highest, best life, which is conformity and submission to a better way. But if I substitute tolerance for acceptance, then tolerance is on the same wavelength, but it's a diminished value with different outcomes. Compliance versus submission, all of these things, you redefine the term, you refresh the vocabulary, and you no longer actually have the ability to argue against the superior because you're so indoctrinated to the inferior, because you know those words. They've been used so much, and the alternate values now seem like a threat.
I think there's something that's just like there's intellectual laziness about it too.
For sure.
Of just not wanting to like think about it that tough and ask a hard question like that and like really look in the mirror and do some soul searching. It's just like,
I mean, that goes back to the idea of we're all too busy to just sit and think.
Yeah.
And maybe we should wrap up soon, but we've been watching this show called Alone, which is on the History Channel. And
oh, right. You were telling me about that. Yeah.
these scenarios where they go drop 10 contestants off in different places, totally alone. They can pick 10 survivalist kind of items, and the one we're on now is in the Arctic.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah. But what is interesting is all of them are harsh environments, but they picked the name correctly. The true dynamic is it's not so much the external circumstance, it's the inner turmoil of their aloneness. That in a number of the scenarios, the people tap out because they got an injury or whatever. They just became so physically depleted. There is a physical dimension. But what's fascinating as every season unfolds is inevitably the people begin to face themselves in ways that all the props and distractions of modern life aren't there. They can't hide who they are in the busyness of life. Every day has 24 hours with no one but you to face. And they end up revisiting their inner demons of their mistaken childhood, or the people they've hurt, or the ways they haven't appreciated their family. And all of a sudden alone it's not a joyous conquest of circumstance. It's a confrontation with who they really are, and that becomes very burdensome to all of them in a way that many of them will tap out because they just can't stand to be alone.
Well, I wonder how...
And we aren't meant to be alone, so I'm not saying that's the ideal.
Right, yeah, but your point
social
is
creatures.
What comes up when you turn your phone off?
Right.
What does that actually allow to float to the surface when the waters aren't constantly muddied because there's new information.
Right.
And you finally let it all settle.
Right.
And then you can see what's lurking down there at the bottom.
The emotions, the absence of any original thought, the inability to reason through an issue or to contemplate a hard thing. And it's easier to just go, well, I wonder what's next.
Yeah, it's just easier to get the answer.
Yeah.
It's way harder to think of a better question than it is to find an answer. Like there's a simpler answer. Well, I haven't really thought this through before, but I'm just thinking that when a question comes to mind and I just ask before thinking, I'll get a certain answer for that. And maybe I'm like, okay, well, that's at least an answer. And that was easier than me stopping and thinking and then maybe doing more work on it. But when you take the time to really carefully craft the question that you want to ask, and then you ask that question, you might get an answer that's so different from the one that would have just came from the top of your head. It might be such a different answer that it actually changes your mind about it.
Right.
But if you just do the lazy question and then you get even if it's a thoughtful answer, but it's to a lazy question, all that does is justify that process.
Yeah.
I do the quick, lazy question, I get the immediate answer, and now I go on about my way. And maybe there was something that was so valuable right there, but you just walked right past it because you're like, I don't want to stop and look around and see where I'm at. I'll just go this way.
Yeah.
And what's right around you that you've been... this might not actually be relevant to anybody, but I've noticed for myself, there's so many times when I'm looking for something and maybe it's my phone or it's just like I left something I need. And I found that I will go looking all around the house and finally come back where I was. And it was my pen. It was right here.
Right.
But there's so many times where I just personally am like, I need something and I'm missing it. And if I would have just stopped, taken a quick breath, and looked around, I'd be like, there it is. It's literally right here where I actually need it.
Right.
But in my head, I'm like, I better go look.
Yeah.
You just instinctively go and do something without taking the time to appreciate that maybe that's happening. Maybe the best thing to do isn't to just constantly... Okay, here's how I think I want to make this point. When we're too in touch with our body and not in touch enough with the spirit, we do what Peter did, which is we fall asleep. Because I feel that I'm tired. And so I'm not going to really consider, I'm so tired. I'm just tired. I'm just going to fall asleep.
Right.
But that's giving into temptation, the way that Jesus put it.
Right.
And again, that does come within the framing of like, that was the hour for vigilant watchfulness.
Right.
And he gave into the temptation of sleep. But I think we can extrapolate from that the principle of discern the hour that you're living in. How ought we to be behaving?
Right.
Like, for me as a father, is this a time for me to be playing video games like I did when I was a teenager?
Right.
Was it necessarily bad when I was a teenager? Maybe it was a little bit.
Yeah.
But right now, if I was playing 2, 3, 4 hours a day, maybe that actually would be bad.
Yeah.
Maybe that doesn't look great for my daughter to see me playing video games. Maybe
Right.
that's not good for my wife to come home from work and see me playing video
Right.
games. So it does
And
matter.
maybe it's not good for you.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not. So that's why it's good to know the hour that we live in. But for like food for thought for a future conversation is how can we really discern the hour that we live in?
Yeah.
Like where do we get that from?
Well, in that, in that story, Gethsemane,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just struck again by the relational dynamic. Jesus is saying to his friends, be present with me. And it wasn't because they were actually going to talk. He was going to be in prayer.
Yeah.
And he wanted them to pray while he prayed. So they aren't actually talking to each other, but it's still an inherently relational dynamic of presentness together. And some of what a running theme through all these conversations is the idea of the disembodied AI, the disembodied digital reality, the disembodied data or fact that I can get. Part of my awakening in this, and I'm ashamed to say it took me this long to see it, but years ago, I was in a conversation with another family. I've got a lot of respect for them. And I was talking about, I made the joke that we all make, there was something came up and it was like, oh, I just need to Google that. We were talking about our kids. And so I jokingly said, yeah, just have them Google that. And they said, we don't do it that way. We don't tell our kids to go Google something. We say, let's go Google it. So that even the search for the answer would be relational, and that the answer they got could be given context so that the child wasn't left to manage the information. Again, that the idea that the knowledge of good and evil, Adam, who told you were naked, he came to a conclusion on his own based on the facts that God was not a part of. And the idea that facts alone are true outside of a relational context and a narrative is not true.
Yeah, disembodied, like you said.
Disembodied. So their family motto was, we'll use Google, but it's always going to be governed through a relational process to help interpret the information, apply it, give wisdom and context and narrative to it, so that the child isn't left interpreting on their own and maybe drawing wrong conclusions or finding the wrong answer or whatever it might be. That's part of this. Watch and pray with me. There's in this dark kind of hour. I mean, I keep feeling the need to recontextualize some of this for people that are watching and saying, what does this have to do with AI? But there is I think in a sense, we're moving into what the world would say is the brightest hour of human history. We're being promised a new kind of utopia.
An era of peace.
Right. And yet, I think it is simultaneously the darkest hour. I think we're moving into more the dark ages in terms of the limitations of knowledge, the who controls the knowledge, the dark ages of the promise of something divorced from reality, the promise of advancement, independent of relationship, of wisdom, independent of experience, all these things. And so in closing with that, I think Jesus saying, watch and pray with me, isn't just stay connected to God, stay connected to me. It is, at the broader sense for our conversation, how do we be present and alert through the craziness of what we're talking about?
Yeah, like, is this the time to say, no, this is an era of peace? Like, I don't need to be concerned about where my government is heading. I don't need to be concerned about the intentions of the World Health Organization or the World Economic Forum. I want to trust them, But either way, it's still I'm serving them if I trust them.
Right.
Because I'm saying they're going to lead me to the promised land. And so I'll do what they want me to do. But then if I read the Bible and I come to a different conclusion that I don't think I should be feeling at ease with the development of these technologies we can't even understand. And I don't like that those companies are all in bed with each other in NGOs like the WEF and the WHO. Like Meta's there, Google's there, Apple's there, Amazon's there, all the major investment firms are there, BlackRock is there, all these people are participating in that. And so when this entity that is somehow beyond even in America where we have a democracy where we vote who's in control, but somehow we're now like a feudal lord subservient to the WEF, which is like the meta entity. It's basically the Tower of Babel that has been erected to say nobody will own anything except for us, and everyone will be happy, especially us.
Yeah.
I don't trust that, and I don't like that. So I guess you would have to be willing to have faith in your. You would have to be willing to believe that what is provoking fear in you is coming from fear of God rather than fear of man. So that's super important. But then that leads to the beginning of wisdom, and then you can use wisdom to discern. And that's what I think allows us to have a conversation like this, is because we don't have to go off into esoteric theories that profit us nothing.
Yeah.
But we can really come to a better understanding of who we are and where we have our own faults. And then we can be better fathers to our families.
Yeah.
And we can be closer together, and we can grow in our faith. And I guess you know a tree by its fruit, right? Yeah. So if this really is productive conversation, it's going to allow us to be more alert to what's going on around us. Yeah. And we're going to be protecting our families from those influences. Yeah. That was really cool about how they say, let's Google it.
Right.
You could be like, oh, that's so semantic. It's just, that's just the way that they do it. But now they're saying this is a tool.
Right.
It is not giving you the answer. We will decide what we think.
Right.
We will. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.